My name is Bill Freeze. I'm here as your instructor on a trip through building and flying the Great Plains PT-40. I've been involved in model aviation since I was a boy, and to be honest, the changes in the last 10 or 15 years are astonishing. Materials, techniques, the works. In our tape, we've attempted to complement the Great Plains instruction manual, which in my estimation is about the best one I've ever seen provided with a model airplane kit. It's a far cry from the liner notes that used to be printed on the side of the plans. Between the manual and our tape, we're confident that just about anybody can build and fly this plane successfully. You'll find we've referred to a great number of brand name products, and these are ones which are familiar and comfortable to me. So be sure to refer to the people in the know in your area and have a great time building our airplane. Here are some of the tools you'll definitely need. A small pair of pliers, a metal straight edge, a larger pair of cutoff pliers, an electric drill, a small razor knife, some masking tape. A tweezers is handy for small parts which have to be put into small places. Sanding block is an absolute necessity. A small saw. This will be used to cut pieces here and there. T-pins. Your T-pins will be used to hold some parts down to your table as you work. Finally, a heating iron for getting your covering on. You may find a blowgun like this is very convenient for shrinking the larger areas of your covering material. CA glues like these, two-part epoxies, which will be used in the high-stress areas, and an aliphatic resin glue in some areas. A few minutes ago, I rubbed my hands down with this skin shield. You'll find this material protects your hands very nicely from CA glues and from epoxies, and allows you to wash it off after you finish your job. You may not be familiar with all the parts of a plane, so let's take a quick run through of what makes up our model airplane. You've got your wing, the body, referred to as the fuselage. Up here we've got our engine, propeller, spinner assembly, and finally back here, stabilizer, the elevator, the vertical fin, and our rudder. And down below, the undercarriage with the wheels, and of course, inside the body, we've got our radio control assembly and servos. The plane we've chosen to build today is the Great Plains PT-40, PT for Perfect Trainer. A look at the box and you'll see it's a lightweight, large, slow-flying, easy-learning airplane. In fact, let's begin by opening up and seeing what comes inside here. Number one, and right on top, the PT-40 instruction manual. This book is over 40 pages long and is chock full of the things you'll need to know to get your plane in the air and back down on the ground safely. Let's get started by punching out some of the die-cut plywood parts. You'll find most of these parts press out very easily from their sheets. As we work our way through these parts, we're going to be certain to refer back to the plan book on page 6, where you'll find a very clear roadmap of what each of these die-cut parts is. As we work along, we're going to label them with a felt tip marker so that you can identify them later on as you build the plans. Here's one that's going to require a little bit of help from our hobby knife. So let's just carefully scribe around any lines that are not easy to remove right out. You can see the knife just breaks right through the back there. And let's see if we can get it. There she goes. Let's not discard all these pieces that we're taking apart here. You'll find they're good to mix glue on later on. You also will need a couple of little scraps to build reinforcements into some of the model. I've taken a couple of moments to get the plan rolled out here on our work surface. We've taped it down at the four corners, and we've used some wax paper to protect the plan from any glue that may drip down onto it during construction. Before we can begin building the fuselage, we've got a couple of parts we've got to put together. Most notable is F1, the firewall. You'll find two pieces of 1/8 inch plywood, which you've punched out and identified previously. It's time to get those out now and to get ourselves some epoxy glue, which is recommended for this job, to put them together. We've got some 4.5 minute pick epoxy here. You'll find this gives you about 4 to 5 minutes to work with. We'll begin with a modest amount of the epoxy, component A and component B. Let's take a look. I'm sure the camera will pick up that we have approximately equal portions. It's very important to try and get them as near equal as possible.
This set behind me is done in black Baron film. Sure is a range of colors.
You don't want to let this stuff go onto your surfaces half mixed. You'll find that part of it will cure and part will not. So we're going to mix it thoroughly for half a minute or so. And then we're going to get F1 over here. And we're going to spread it uniformly across the part. We really don't need to put it on both sides. And frankly, this glue is so strong that you need very, very little to produce a nice, strong bond. So we're going to spread it thin all the way across the part. As you can see, we want to get it out to the edges. We don't really want to miss any. This is the piece that carries the engine of your airplane and is going to carry it into the sky or into the ground if it doesn't stay together. So let's get it glued thoroughly. You can see we're scraping excess off. Let's turn it. Get this last part over here. Now we're ready to glue it together. Since this glue dries rather slowly, you've got a couple of minutes to get your parts positioned. We've squared them up. We've raided the laundry room for a couple of clothespins. You could stand here and hold this for 4 to 5 minutes. Frankly, I'd prefer to do something else. So the clothespins are that extra hand that I need to keep the job rolling along. 1 or 2 more. And in about 5 minutes, we'll have our firewall glued and ready to get started constructing the fuselage. Out here at the field, you really don't need too much to get your plane in the air. You'll need some fuel. You'll need a fuel bulb or some device to get the fuel in and out of your tank, and a clip of some sort to power your glow plug with 1.5 volts. Model aviation, like any other hobby, has a raft of accessories available. We've got some here from the Hobbyco line. We've got an electric starter, which makes it very easy and reliable to get your engine rolling. An expanded scale voltmeter, which will allow you to monitor the condition of both your transmitter and receiver batteries. A fuel pump. A tachometer, which will allow you to test engine RPM. And over here, a power panel, which can power all your accessories from one convenient location. Finally, a field box, which allows you to carry everything and store it conveniently on your way to and from the field. First of all, we're going to need the 2 1/8 inch balsa fuselage sides. Hopefully you've marked them same as we have. We marked them outside here to allow us a little bit of freedom in what we do on the inside of the pieces. In addition, you'll need the fuselage doublers. These are 1/8 inch plywood, again rather large and should be very easy to identify. The fuselage doubler should be carefully aligned with the fuselage side up around the front. Let's let our camera see. We want a nice clean line here. We'd like the 2 to mate very, very clearly. Toward the rear, you'll find that there is a 1/8 inch space between the bottom of the balsa and the bottom of the ply. We've used one of the 1/8 inch lock plates to measure this 1/8 inch gap. We're going to take some thin CA glue. This is the instant formula, again pick stick here, and we're going to carefully work our way around the entire piece. We do want to use enough glue to get it to flow underneath and provide a good bond. All the way around the inside, we can put a little in through these holes, a little in the landing gear area, all the way up around the nose here. Again, the intention is to use a large amount of glue because we do want it to flow underneath and provide some strength. As soon as we see it set, we're going to pick it up. We're going to work our way around the front of it. We'll hold it together, and we're going to get some glue to wick right into that open joint. You may or may not be familiar with Pick Pronto. Now, this product is designed to accelerate the hardening of instant glues beyond their already pretty fast set time. What we can do with this is squirt a little bit on any joints that don't want to harden immediately. You'll find this forces an instant cure of either the thin formula or the thick formula CA glues. We'll take this fuselage doubler, get our straight edge out, and we're going to draw a nice clean line. Hopefully we can see this with the camera. We're going to draw a nice clean line across the front of these two slots. This is going to help us align the tripplers. Let's see if the camera can pick that up. Looks good. So, upper tripler and lower tripler, we're going to put those in place carefully. It's very important that we line them up with that pencil line we've just drawn. Now, we're going to get one of them in place, carefully lined up, and we're going to wick some glue all the way around the sides. Again, a very fast cure, so you want to get it in place right the first time. If it doesn't want to set for you, a little squirt of that instant material will take care of it. To move on to the upper tripler, we're going to require one of the engine beams. These fit in between the upper and lower triplers, and they're used to space the two parts. So we're placing the engine beam in here. We're going to get the other tripler in place. Get it nice and firmly up against it. And back to the line which we've drawn. We're going to remove the engine beam. We don't want to glue that in at this point. And just as before, let's run that glue right around there. And in a matter of a few moments, this glue will be set and we'll have the nose portion constructed. We take our recently constructed fuselage half and place it over the plan. We're going to line it up carefully. This is an important step if we're going to build a straight airplane. I don't know if we can get a camera in tight enough to see them, but there are very clear little arrows at several locations. We're going to get our straight edge right above them and carefully draw one and another one and right on back, and finally the last one. So we'll carefully align these two parts. Hey, look at that, they do match. And transfer these lines. We're doing the top first right now. We're going to flip it over and get the bottom. Okay, now we'll take the other fuselage half and we'll connect the lines that we've drawn, top and bottom. Just like that. I'll leave the rest of connecting these to you. Basically no different from what we've done before. Time for us to get the lock plates in place now. We've got one which has an angled side to it, and there we are. This one is going to be used on the top of the fuselage, and one that's rectangular with just a little slot, and this will be used on the bottom of the fuselage. Let's do the top ones first. They're a little simpler. One of them is done at the back. Please don't put one in. You'll be in for a surprise. If you refer to the plan, you'll find that's where the stab saddle doubler goes. And we'll get that in place right now too. The forward edge of it is going to line up with one of the lines we've drawn. We're going to glue it again with the fast formula CA glue. We're going to wick it in from the sides and let it soak under a little. And we're going to get a little around that side. And that's one of them in place. It's worth an extra moment to carefully get this saddle aligned for the stab. This is one of the major problems in model airplane building. People get the stabilizer out of alignment and they wonder why the plane goes sideways all the time. Let's hold it down firmly, and again we'll wick that glue all the way around it. And you can see it soaks right into the balsa pretty rapidly. So you want to hold it in place. We'll get some right down the back here and across the top. Finally, let's get the bottom lock plates in. So we're going to use one of the lock plates, I hope you can see it now, as a gauge to get this set. And we can remove it now. Let's place it back down here on the work surface. Double check our 1/8 inch gap. Looks good to me. And let's get some glue around it. that's one. Just get this one squared up, again right between the lines. Still 1/8 inch off from the bottom. And in goes the glue. You'll feel a little heat as the glue sets. That's natural. And let's align one more here. And look at that. The lock plates are now in place. And the basics of constructing this fuselage side are done. We've completed the lock plate installation at this point on both fuselage sides. You can see they're all in place and pretty much ready to start making this look like an airplane. We'll turn this over now. A couple of small jobs we have done off camera. We've installed the upper fuselage side, which is glued onto the balsa and the plywood on the back. We've also drilled holes through the plywood, and the locations are clear. They were already stamped through the ply. Drilled them through the balsa with a 5/16 inch drill, and this will be the spot in which we locate the wing hole down dowels. They'll pass through both sides of the fuselage, and as you can see, we've done it on both sides. Finally, we have one little job to do here before we can move further. That's to take a hobby knife. We're going to slice in, and we're going to slice down right along the line of the tripler. And you saw a small piece pop out, probably. That piece does not belong in there. And then we'll work on the back where the stab goes. And you'll find a small vertical cut, and then a little horizontal cut right along the top, and out comes the piece. We've done a little bit of work on F1 off camera just to speed things up a bit. What we've done is we've drilled 4 1/8 inch holes at the locations which were shown, and we've also drilled 2 3/16 inch holes. F1 will drop right into the spots right up there. You can see F1 has dropped right in and sits pretty firmly. After F1, we'll take F2, and F2 goes into the second space. Fuselage bottom next. We're going to get this located right in here, and with a little bit of luck and a little balancing, we'll be able to put the other fuselage half right on top of this. We've sneaked back off camera for a moment and gotten a second set of hands here to help put these rubber bands around the fuselage pieces. And as you can see, we've gotten all the formers in place along the length of the fuselage. We've got the fuselage bottom in place. A few thoughts come up now about the engine choice. We've chosen the OS-40 FP. We'll take this out of the box here. This little engine is frankly the one that's used right here on the plan, and you'll find it simplifies your entire installation tremendously if you happen to use this engine. You'll find every hole practically lines up perfect. You can bore holes without much thought almost. This is the one to use for my money. Slide the engine beams in, and you can see our careful work before has made these a pretty tight fit. Right on top of that go your breakaway plates. And we've got 2 of those. And finally, with a little bit of luck, we'll drop an engine right in there. Okay, starting to look a little bit like an airplane. Assuming you're using a brand new engine, you're going to require a little bit of on-the-ground break-in time before you're ready to fly. Our OS-40 FP has some clear instructions provided. I've got an assistant holding the plane back so that I can demonstrate to you what we're doing. We'd like to get a tank or 2 of fuel through the engine at a low throttle setting, a high throttle setting, in fact the full range. We're going to run it rather rich at the full settings to allow the engine to break in a bit though. So let's get our radio turned on. We're going to start this engine at low throttle, and we're using the quick clip starter from Dubro, which is real convenient. We'll bring it up 1 click, and we've already got a little fuel up there in the engine, so let's see if it starts. Well, 1 start. Let's try again. We need another click of throttle. And there we go. We're going to take it up to full throttle now, and you'll hear it's kind of rich from the sound. Our needle valve here adjusts the setting, And we're just going to let it run through the first tank of fuel. And progressively, we'll lean it out slightly, and that'll be turning the needle in. Let's take the starter off now. Make sure she still runs. We'll lean it slightly, and you'll hear it pick up a few RPM. We've got enough time on this engine now to where we can check the full range of throttle setting. So let's go to a low setting. You can probably see now we're down to a nice enough idle where we'll be able to taxi the engine on the ground, and we should be able to take off and land using that setting. So we'll go back up to full throttle, and we'll run through the balance of the tank. As you can see, we've managed to get this fuselage together. We've done a little bit of hole drilling on engine plates. Let's run you through the gluing procedure for the fuselage itself. It's very important to build a straight fuselage to make a good flying airplane. With rubber bands around it, we've placed it directly over the overhead view on the plan. We've gotten our head right on top of it here and made certain that the lines along the outside line up. You should be particularly concerned that the tail end of the fuselage lines up with the tail end of the plan. This is a place where people do very frequently get into trouble. With it directly on top and with rubber bands tight in place, we've taken our thin Formula Instant Glue pick stick here, and we've begun flowing the glue down into all the joints. We're holding it together tightly as the glue sets, but this happens very quickly. We'll do another one right here. And up here, you'll notice we've added the F2A pieces in this area. We've decided to build the A wing, and the F2A parts are added and glued right into place. We're going to flow some more glue into the next joint. Keep in mind, you're doing this over the plan. We're tilting the fuselage for clarity only. We're going to move back a little and finally get the rest of them. Hopefully on your own you should be able to get this glued together. There's a very short wait for the glue to set. Afterwards, we've gone back with some of our thick formula pick, and we filled in on top of a lot of the joints. We've then gone back over with our instant glue accelerator, and this product again sets that glue off very quickly and helps to fill the small gaps that are created. So at this point, we've got a pretty sturdy fuselage. Going back to our epoxy mixing instruction, which we ran a little earlier, we've mixed up a batch of epoxy, and we've added the two engine beams up here in the nose, and they're firmly epoxied in now. A nice tight fit, and keep in mind you want a good joint there. You're particularly concerned with the fact that these two inside corners fit nicely against F1 and provide a good tight glue joint. You don't want this stuff coming loose up in the air or down on the ground. With that same batch of epoxy, we've glued in the landing gear plate. I prefer epoxy for this. This is a high stress area. It's very easy to mix up a little additional epoxy, get it into place, and get this glued in. We've got our breakaway plates. Let's place them in. Now, we're set up with a drill which we've prepared off stage. We're using a 3/32 inch bit, and we're going to drill 3 holes directly down. Again, follow the plan for exact positioning. Got to be a little careful we don't drill right down into the side of the fuselage. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. We're using the Sullivan 8-ounce flex tank. You can see this will conform to some tighter positions inside the front of your airplane. And we've pre-assembled the parts that make up the cap assembly. And these will all press together to form a nice leak-proof seal. I've got a complete tank here, cap assembly in place, and we've cut out the back to show you the way a completed tank looks. Very important that you adjust the length of your pickup tube to just allow the clunk to reach the back end of the tank. You can see we've bent up a piece of tubing into the little tank bubble, which gives you a full tank of fuel every time. And the clunk will follow the fuel whether the plane is right side up or upside down. Let's take the hatch cover off and take a look at a completed fuel tank assembly. We've got a little foam in place. The line that is attached to the carburetor runs through F1 at the holes we've drilled, which are shown on the plan, and attaches to the brass tube to the clunk, and your other line to your pressure tap on your muffler, and that goes to the vent, which is up at the top of the tank in the little bubble. Now we'll install the windshield and hatch. First, let's put the 1/2-inch balsa triangle windshield brace in place and apply using thin CA glue. You'll find it fits right in, and we're going to flow some thin formula CA on both sides to get it positioned. And using our sanding block, we're going to contour this piece to the rounded shape of the fuselage sides. It doesn't take a lot of work to get that set. At this point, we're going to get the piece which forms the windshield, and we're going to apply some thick CA to the 1/2-inch balsa triangle. And we'll get it right onto the sides. And we're going to get a little bit of spray bottle of water. We'll place the windshield down in its spot, dampen it slightly so that we can contour it, and it's holding nice and firm. We're going to put a little bit of thick CA across the top of F2 where it'll bite on, and gently we're going to wrap this down to the shape of the fuselage and hold it firmly as the glue sets. It's going to take a couple of minutes for the glue to set. We can speed that up again using our accelerator. A shot front and back, and let's see if we've got it. There we go. We're going to trim off any excess along the sides and along the back. Not much there, it looks like a good fit. As you can see, we've gotten a little work done along on this one. Here's a completed hatch. We've taken a small tab, in fact one of the pieces we knocked out from the fuselage former, and glued it on the back. It acts as a little tongue and wedges underneath the windshield. Drops right in place. You may require a little bit of sanding or cutting up here near the front to get a good clean fit. Let's keep working here on the front of the airplane. As you can see, we've got an engine mounted on this one. We did a little bit of positioning work to get this figured out. Let's run through some of that real quick. The beams which we've previously installed and drilled holes through are in place. The engine was positioned to allow adequate room for our spinner backplate so that it does not rub up against the front of the fuselage. So you should ensure yourself that you've got at least 1/8 of an inch or a little more clearance between the back of your spinner and the fuselage itself. We'll turn it over and take a look. We've installed blind nuts down here just as we did on F1, and we've installed the engine using just one 440 bolt at this point, and you can see the end of it protruding through. We are at this point able to see that we've got the mount in for your nose gear. In fact, that was just installed with several 440 bolts which are provided in the kit. And finally, with the plane in this position, I think we can clearly see that we've installed the landing gear. And taking a careful look at the plan, what we've done is positioned it carefully with respect to the airplane, drilled a number of holes to match the landing gear mounts, and we've installed it with a couple of the little nylon mounts, and at this point we're pretty much ready to continue on and start to make this look like an airplane. This is a Dubro wheel collar, and we're using a Dubro 2.5-inch wheel, which we've got in place, and another wheel collar. And you can see the little Allen wrench we use to tighten it. Get it nice and tight. We don't want to lose this in the air. It makes for some untidy landings. In addition, if we're flying from a grass field, we're ready to use a larger wheel. I've got some 3-inch ones here, and the plan does recommend, if you're flying from a rougher field, that you use a 2 3/4-inch main wheel and a 2.5-inch nose wheel. We've drawn a straight line parallel to the sides of the fuselage and even with the outermost hole along the steering arm, which we've installed also. The hole starts at about 1 5/8 inches back from the front of F1 and ends about 2 3/4 inches back. At this point, we can take our drill and we're going to drill a series of 1/8 inch holes right along that line. And the holes are going to form the slot through which our push rod, which will steer the airplane, is going to fit. One more. Now we'll take our hobby knife and we'll square this up into a slot. In fact, there it goes. And hopefully the camera can pick it up. It's starting to look like a slot. We'll square that up a little bit with a straight edge a little later on. But we can move on to a couple other slots we'll have to cut through the side of the fuselage at this point. If we go to the aft portion here of the fuselage, you'll notice we've already cut a slot. Basically, we've reviewed the plan and picked the location carefully. And you'll see we've installed a blue Sullivan goldenrod outer tube through here. This is a method we're going to use to control the airplane at this point. We've decided to use that in this model. And we'll flip it over. And on the other side, you'll see, again, according to plan, we've cut another slot and installed another goldenrod. Take a quick look inside, and you can see the goldenrods run from the tail of the plane up to the front. A little later on, we'll get into some details on how the goldenrods work and some of their advantages in this type of installation. I find they're going to be just about perfect for the plane we're building today. We've got the stabilizer front, which we placed on a flat surface and glued to the stabilizer rear using thin CA. Let's take a look at one of the tips. As you can see, we've installed the 1/4-inch square piece on both the right and the left tips, as well as on the elevator. We've then placed the stabilizer over the plan, and rather carefully using a pencil or a felt tip marker, we've marked the hinge locations, and there are 6. We've then transferred those locations over here onto the elevator by placing the two together and just carrying the line right across. In the same manner, we've put together the fin, front, and rear, again on a flat surface using thin CA glue. The rudder will fit on the back, and let's see if we can get that, like this. And I think it's time now that we take a look at how we hinge these two parts together. Our friends at Dubro have come up with some clever devices to help do this job, one that's frustrated modelers for many years. They have a very small plastic device here which helps us locate the center of the piece we're hinging, and a cutting tool which allows us to poke a slot into that piece of wood very accurately through this tool. Let's just see how it works. We placed it centered over our mark. Take the pointed device and press firmly into the balsa. Got to be a little bit careful that we don't get it off center too much. We'd like to stay dead center if possible. And then with the tool removed, we can just work our way back in once or twice to straighten the hole out. And finally, in the little kit, there's a balsa picker tool, for want of a better word, which we're going to use to get the section out of the middle here. And you can see it comes out pretty easily. Out it comes. And we can clean it up there, brush it away. Now let's get one of Dubro's hinges. The Dubro hinge has a metal pin and it's very, very free. Doesn't put any bind into the system if it's installed properly. Let's see if that fits into the slot that we've been working to make. There we go. We've made one other slot up here. Let's take a look at that one. Again, good. As we did before, we're going to transfer the lines onto the rudder. And using our tool once again, let's see if we can cut another slot as nicely as the first one. Again, we're working carefully to make sure we push straight into the piece. Don't want to go off at an angle and have it come shooting out the side. And that should be deep enough. Again, we'll pick out small bits of balsa. You'll notice the nice part of this system is it doesn't force you to draw center lines. The centering is done by the tool, and it's pretty darn accurate. You'll find this has a lot to do with well-controlled models. Let's get another hinge out and see how that works. And there we go. In fact, at this point, with only one hinge, we're in a position to try these two together. And there we go. Let's see if they work. As you can see, we've got a part that moves pretty freely. It's our intention when we're done to have a part that moves just this freely, and we'll show you later in the production how these parts are glued together after the model's been covered. I'd like to take a second to suggest that you join the AMA before you attempt to fly your model airplane. The AMA, and that's the Academy of Model Aeronautics, is an umbrella organization here in the United States for model aviation. It'll provide you with both valuable support and insurance coverage in case you have any difficulties in flying. We've designed our tape with you in mind to provide as much help as possible in both building and flying your plane. But I do strongly suggest that in learning to fly, you find an instructor to help you with those critical first few flights. The best place for you to find an instructor is probably your local flying club. This is mine, and I'm proud to be a member. We've removed the main landing gear and the nose gear from the fuselage at this point, and it's time that we start installing the stabilizer on the tail. With our fuselage firmly down on our building surface, we're going to measure the height of the two tips of the stabilizer. In looking back and forth, it looks like we're about 1/4 of an inch high on the left side of the airplane here. So what we're going to do is remove the stabilizer and sand to fit. We will get it to where it's perfectly square. At that point, there's another piece of alignment we'd like to consider, and the way we're going to do that is using a metal straight edge yardstick. What we're going to do is we're going to mount it on centers, and we've got a little mark here. It happens to have a hole in it, which makes it very convenient, and we're going to measure the distance to the rear corners. It happens to be 27.5 inches on this side. Let's see what it measures on the other side. Over here we're about 27.25, so we've got a little bit of an alignment problem, which we'll just have to correct by moving it. We want to keep it on centers, but we do want to get those two measurements, one to equal the other. Now we're down to 27.3/8, and on this side, 27.3/8. That's about where we'd like to be. At this point, we're going to take a pencil and draw a line on the bottom of the stabilizer as to where we want it to fit against the fuselage. This line will help us realign it when we go back to do the final gluing, which will be our next step. And in fact, right now is the time to get your 5-minute epoxy, glue the saddle area, firmly place the stabilizer on it, and give it that 5 minutes to set. Well, we're back. The epoxy is set up, and as you can see, our stabilizer's in place. What we've done here, and we'll get a close-up, is we've drawn two lines, each of them 1/8 inch off the center line down the middle of the stabilizer. These are to aid in alignment of the vertical fin. We'll take our vertical fin, and as you can see, we've tack glued the rudder onto the fin. This will aid us in alignment to make sure we wind up with this thing exactly where we'd like it. We've put 1 drop of glue, and only 1 drop of glue, and glued the two pieces together. They'll separate easily a little later on when we have to do the hinging and final assembly. Well, let's just trial fit this. As you can see, it's a pretty darn good fit. Let's get our little angle here and measure that we're at 90 degrees. Looks pretty good to me. Not a lot of work to do. At this point, We're going to mix a small batch of 5-minute epoxy again. We'll apply that epoxy to the bottom edge of the fin, place it between those two lines. Again, we'll be certain that the rudder aligns with the back of the fuselage, square it up, and allow it to set. Like any airplane, there's a pre-flight checklist that we're going to run through before we're ready to fly. Let's take a look at it right now. First, be sure you're in compliance with the frequency control rules at your flying field. Our Futaba radio system recommends at least 30 yards of range on the ground with the antenna depressed. We've got our assistant about 90 feet down, and we're just going to make sure that we've got full control of all of our functions on the radio. Everything looks good. I guess we're about ready to fly. I've moved our building here into the kitchen now, probably a place where a lot of you are working yourselves. Big spacious workshop is not what everybody has. Your PT-40 wing is made to fit together without glue. You've got your leading and trailing edges, which are formed on one long piece. You will have to break them apart and sand or use your hobby knife to remove the excess material, which comes off very easily, as you can see. We've prepared our leading edge right here and our trailing edge, and do have them pinned down to the plan. The top of each of these parts is marked with a red mark, and you'll find the edge, outside wingtip edge, has a notch in it. You'll have to identify these and make sure you've got the right pair of parts to build your wing. It's very important that the spar be aligned with the wing tip, and since we've got it pinned down, we can slide it back and forth slightly, and we're going to get over here and make certain that it is lined up with the mark on the tip. We've got our trailing edge in place, and again, the same story. We do want to bring it out to the edge of the wing tip. Now's the time for us to start placing wing ribs on the plan. You'll find these are a nice tight fit. Be a little careful that you don't damage them in putting them in place. Let's get the leading edge in here. I would strongly suggest that you follow the gluing method that's shown in the plan. These parts fit so tightly that if you try to use a different type of glue, for instance white glue, it swells the wood enough that they won't fit together. You'll see as you work your way down that they may not line up dead center over the plan. Since the parts are cut accurately, don't worry too much about it. Your main reference will be the wing tip. As long as that lines up, you're going to build a straight wing that will line up for you. The center rib is omitted. That'll be done when you go to join the wing. And there we have leading edge, trailing edge, spar, and wing ribs in place over the plan. It's time now for us to get the upper spar in place. This one takes a little wiggling. Again, important that we begin by aligning it out at the wing tip. Since the spars are made out of a much harder material than the ribs, it's much easier to get it built accurately than to have to sand off material. You'll find that the balsa sand is a lot easier than the basswood that the spars are made from. So get it right the first time before you go near it with any glue, and you won't have to do a monstrous sanding job. And 2 more 3/16 inch spars are going to wind up here in the front. Try to inspect all the parts and make sure they line up correctly. Again, that wing tip is your reference point. They're all pressed together. In fact, this whole assembly is pretty firm sitting here on the building board. I'm going to take a minute to check all the alignments, and it'll be time to glue it together. We do have to hold the rib against the front here for the first gluing. We'll just hold it for a moment because it's not secured all the way around as the rest of the ribs are. And a little more glue. We're going to flow glue down both sides pretty liberally. We will go back over afterwards, and any joints that haven't taken firmly, we'll put a little bit of thick CA around, and we'll use an accelerator to force secure. And here we go. We want to go down both sides of these ribs where they meet the leading edge. And be sure the glue penetrates fully. Here's the last rib finally. Let's take a look over this now and see if there are any joints that are wider than others. I've got a couple. So here we'll switch to our thick formula CA and we'll flow a little in place. As we said at the beginning, the gaps will fill a little better using this formula and provide us with that strong wing that we're looking for. It's about time now for us to mark the dihedral. As you know, the wing angle's up in the center, and we use this little part, mark gauge A. We've chosen to build the A wing, you may recall, and using gauge A, we're going to mark the way the dihedral will be cut into the wing. We're going to line it up directly over the center line, and using a pencil, we're going to mark each of the edges that has to be cut. We have to get these two little spars up on the top. Even though they don't extend all the way down, they need to be cut. And finally, we're going to mark the leading edge here. And if we can get a nice tight shot on the trailing edge, back here, we've got a pencil line, and that's going to be our reference where we have to cut. And there we have it, half a wing. I've made a couple of balance marks on the underside of the wing. As the plan indicates, they're 5/8 of an inch in back of the center of the main spar. I'm going to place a finger on each mark, and we'll pick the plane up overhead and confirm that it does balance at this point level. We definitely want to avoid the plane being tipped way back like this, which would indicate a tail-heavy condition. Also, keep in mind you should balance with the fuel tank empty, because you will have to land the airplane with a near-empty fuel tank very frequently. Balance is very, very important to building a safe and stable flying airplane. In fact, as important or more than building a plane straight. So be sure you get this step right, and you'll be building a plane that's safe and stable to fly. I'm set up to join the wing together now. What I've done is get a few clamps in place just to do this simulated dry to make sure that we've got the dihedral angle correct. In fact, if we swing over here to the left wingtip, we can measure and double check. The A-wing version has 8 inches underneath the wingtip, and we're going to check it both fore and aft and make sure that we have 8 inches. We've used a cardboard box to prop up the end of the wing down below here. I think we can pick that up. And the box keeps the wing at the angle we've set. The wing is joined together using 2-part epoxy glue, but maybe we ought to take a run back to how we got to this point. Let me take the wing panel that we made just a couple of moments ago, and we'll get it on camera. The lines that were drawn have been cut using our hobby saw. After the lines were cut to match, we've carefully sanded using our sanding block to smooth it up and get a good fit. We'll start here at the A2 joiners. I'm going to have to take these clamps off to get the joiners all out of place to get the glue onto them. However, our setup is still about the same, so it shouldn't be too difficult for us to get it back together. Get some glue onto A2. Remember, you don't need an awful lot of epoxy, so get some on there and spread it thin. Gets on your fingers, you can get it off, especially if you've used the skin shield, which we started out with. Well, let's get one of these in place. Alrighty. Clamp will hold it for a moment. It's not terribly important that we get all these done in one shot as long as we get the alignment correct before the glue sets. The glue is plenty strong enough in small quantities. Put my big clamp back on here. Make sure that it is not sticking way up above the top. Put a second clamp to hold this side. And A2 is on the way to joining. And before it goes too much further, again, let's double check. And we still have the 8 inches of dihedral that we were looking for. We've got another wing panel joined and all ready to go. In fact, this one's pretty far along. A couple of steps are done after the gluing. First, we've installed the center wing rib. And this is done, as you'll find in your instruction manual, by taking 2 of the wing ribs, gluing them together, and they're cut into 2 sections. One section which fits from the trailing edge to the spar, and another section which fits from the spar to the leading edge, thick or thin. Let's turn this over and take a look at the fact that we've sheeted the bottom. Using the 1/8 inch thick balsa sheeting, we've carefully cut pieces which fit in between the ribs and the center rib, and then aft of the spar, again, some sections which fit between the trailing edge and the spar. I've chosen a flush door as my working surface, and the square corner of it allows me to do some of the miter sanding pretty easily. I've lined up the trailing edge with the edge of the table and gotten my sanding block lined up with the other side of the table. And now just by sanding back and forth and building a little angle in, I can get a nice squared up angle on the end of the trailing edge. Looks pretty good. You can see very little gap there at the center. And when we glue it, I think we'll have it just perfect. Using one of these triangular shaped pieces, which forms your wingtip, I'll put it in place. Make sure I've got both the leading edge and the trailing edge covered. And I'm just going to mark it using a felt tip marker, which will make it a little easier for me to cut rather than gluing it on first. And now I'm ready to take the marked wing tip, and I'll use my hobby knife and my saw, and I'll get this cut to shape. I've glued on the wing tips, and here in the center, 2 plywood plates have been installed. These protect the trailing edge of the wing, which is rather thin balsa, from any damage due to the rubber bands coming over the top. We've installed one of the wing dowels, and let's install the other one. The dowels have been rounded on the edge to make them pass through a little more easily. And we have both in place. Take your sanding block and sand the plywood doubler on the inside of the fuselage to match the angle formed right here on F2A. We'll do that just... And the area directly below the center front joint will probably have to be relieved a little bit. In fact, I think the camera will show I've sanded lightly here to allow the wing to fit in a little bit better. With our dowels in place, we'll put the fuselage back down on the work table. We'll get the wing located against F2 and put a couple of rubber bands on and see what we've got. These little plywood plates now become a little meaningful as you see the rubber band go directly across it. The rubber bands will chew up the balsa very, very quickly. Now, using our ruler, let's check the height at the 2 tips and see that it's equal. And out to the other tip. And we can remove that, number 1, by checking the positioning of the wing, since we're pretty sure the wing was built straight. And if need be, the saddle area can be sanded slightly. But one final check to make certain that there's no sanding necessary. Okay, looks like we've got it. Well, it's time for that first takeoff. We've held the nose up to make sure the engine is not too lean. We're going to get out in the center of the runway. one more time. We'll run the engine up. Looks good. Moving it back, we'll check that our controls are going in the right direction, up and down and side to side. And it's about time for takeoff here. We'll move a little off to the side. We hold a lot up elevator during the start of the roll. And we're going to gradually advance the throttle and see what happens. Have to give her a little push in the tall grass. Wheels. Bigger wheels. Let's install the engine now. I've installed the plywood breakaway plates, and you can see both of them. They are screwed in place, but definitely not glued. You want them to be removable. And we've clearanced between the two sides so that the engine will fit in between. Let's turn the airplane over and slide the engine into place. We've got our spinner back plate installed, and we've left about 1/8 of an inch clearance, or a little more, between the front of the airplane and the back plate. Let's just see if we can turn that up and show for the camera. There we go. Working from overhead, I've used a long drill bit, but there are a number of ways you can do this. I've marked 4 holes for the engine to be mounted. The holes are drilled. These are 1/8 inch holes to allow our bolts to pass through. And then on the underside, I've installed 4 blind nuts, same way we've done it before, and the blind nuts are glued in there with a drop of glue under each one, and will hold the engine in place. Let's turn it over, get the engine in place. Taking the time to make one substitution in the kit here. We're using socket head screws rather than using the slot head ones. They're a little easier, as far as I'm concerned, to get in and out of the airplane, and you are going to want to take the engine out occasionally in the building process. And as you probably can see, that's a little easier than to try to keep the screwdriver on there. That basically takes care of the engine installation, with one exception. You will have to cut a relief for your muffler to fit. Let's take the muffler now. We've already cut a pretty sizable relief here in the right side of the fuselage, and the muffler fits right in. We've also taken off a fair amount of material up here along the side so that the muffler doesn't lay directly on the fuselage itself. There's about 1/8 of an inch clearance between muffler and fuselage. On the left side of the fuselage, right in this area, we have cut a pretty deep relief for easy access to the needle valve. You don't want to get this too darn close to the fuselage, because you'll find in fumbling trying to set the needle valve, you may put your finger into the propeller. Well, let's see if we have a little more luck getting off the ground with slightly bigger wheels here. Let's take a look at that again in slow motion. You know, this is the actual first flight of this airplane. Let's run through the sequence of events as you leave the ground. We're easing in the throttle. We're taking it from an idle up to full throttle. A little bit of up elevator here helps to hold the nose wheel out of the grass, allows the plane to pick up speed a little more quickly. And of course, we're steering to make sure we stay in line with the runway. Right now, plane's getting light. We're going to ease in a little up elevator. In fact, you can actually see it move. And we'll gently lift off the ground and begin flying away. Going to ease in a little bit of right rudder here, and we'll turn away from the spectator area. And as soon as we get around to a straight and level attitude, we're going to do some adjustment of the trim controls. Our plane did tend to go up a little bit, and we're going to get a little bit of down trim on the elevator so that the plane will fly level. And there's a little bit to the wings. We'll get that rudder trimmed right, and we've got a plane now that'll fly hands off. We're looking at a nice, tidy, clean servo and radio installation. As you see, the switch is located in there, and servos directly behind, and control rods are visible at this point. But let's take a look at some of the steps that are necessary to get to here as far as the installation is concerned. The first step we'd like to do is to install the switch into the servo tray. It'll pass up from beneath, and you'll find the small plastic plate, which is supplied right here, will be screwed over the top. I would suggest at this point that you put the off control so that it'll be on the right side of the airplane. You'll find that way if you carry a wire through the side of the fuselage, the off position will be pushed in, and it cuts down on the chance of accidentally turning the radio on your way to the field and winding up with a dead battery. Your servos, which are provided, have some small rubber grommets. These are used as a vibration insulator. We've installed 3 of them on this servo, and let's get the 4th one and show how it's installed. The Futaba ones just slide right through the open hole in place like that. I think we can see it. And you can see there are small brass grommets in all the holes except that last one. The grommet is installed from the bottom. It can be a little tricky, so we're going to fiddle with it. And push it into the hole. The grommets will prevent you from over-tightening the screws, which would kill the vibration dampening of the rubber assembly. Your servos will drop through the tray, and they're a real easy fit. And with servos in the tray, we're going to use some of these Phillips head screws that were provided with the Futaba system to secure the servo down to the tray. We're going to put all 4 in. It is important that this be nice and firmly attached. The last thing you'd want to have is a servo working its way loose during flight. Your finished assembly, again, is going to look quite a bit like what we've done here. You can see screws in place, switch in place, and of course we have control horns in place, and that's where we're heading next. Before we run through installing the control horns on the elevator and rudder, let's just take a quick look at what they do on the back portion of this completed fuselage. We've got our assistant moving them back and forth, and maybe he can move the elevator up and down for us at the same time. It's important that we get these pieces in the right place, lined up with the control horns, and we'd like them to move freely and be secure enough that they're not going to come off in flight. To install the control horns, here's what you'll need to do. First, figure their location from your plan and mark it. Find your control horn itself. I've got one right here in my hand. Mark it on that location. There are 2 holes which will have to be drilled through it. Use a felt tip marker or a pencil and mark them. You'll find it's very, very easy, since it's balsa, to just score right through and leave a small mark in the balsa. Then we removed and drilled through. In fact, you can see a little ding here in the balsa where we've slipped with a screwdriver, and we'll be filling that in a little later. And finally, we've placed the horn on the surface. We've taken a little 256 screw, which is furnished, and we've worked it through the surface. And with it through, we've installed the nylon backup plate on the other side and screwed it together. Remember, don't make them so tight as to crush the balsa, and do not glue them in. They do have to be removable to cover your plane later on. We've installed the servos up here in the front of the plane, and as we just finished, control horns at the tail. And now the next job is to provide something to link the 2 together, and that's these Sullivan golden rods. The kit have provided several dowels, which can be used very successfully. I've used them for years. However, in this particular airplane, and with the beginner in mind, the golden rods make a lot of sense. They provide a nice, neat installation in the tail, and that's the toughest area because it gets quite tight back here. Let's get our camera back, and you can see there isn't a heck of a lot of room back here, so that if you do have the push rods moving back and forth, you've got to be very careful to get them in nice and clean and fair. Once your Sullivan golden rod blue tubes are in place, you'll find there's really no question about whether it's a fair lead or not. It's clean and simple. In order to use them, you'll see we've provided an anchor support about halfway, and then finally, right behind our servo tray, we've got a large ply plate to anchor them in place. This plate I've made adjustable. It'll move up and down. Let's see if we can get a look at this. We can pull it up a little further. And we're going to finally glue this after the installation is complete. We'll make sure we get a nice straight lead between the tail and the servos. In order to install these, you're going to have to learn how to make a Z-bend if you haven't already. The manual gives a good instruction of this, but essentially we're going to take one of the supplied rods, we're going to bend it 90 degrees, and then we're going to grab it tight with our needle nose pliers, and we're going to bend it back 90 degrees the other way. And I don't know if we can get a close look at this, but we've got a Z-bend now, which when installed through the servo wheel is captured and can't come loose. You don't have to use any sort of connector. You'll wiggle it in through the bottom of the wheel and then down, and it'll sit tight. Here's what a Z-bend looks like at the servo end. We've made a simplified little servo installation here. And you can see the Z-bend is fixed and can't really go anywhere. As we move back to the other end, you're going to find that you've got a clevis. And the nice part of the clevis is you can turn it in or out, and this allows you adjustability. This way, if your airplane is trimmed slightly off, you don't have to disassemble the entire plane to correct the installation. So you'll turn this in or out several turns after your first flight to get the airplane trimmed correctly to fly straight and level. And this will allow you further adjustment with your transmitter. Let's take a look at one of Sullivan's special features in this goldenrod, and that's this little safety clip. You may be able to see this little metal clip which snaps right over the clevis link. Once this is in place, you'll find it's almost impossible for this clevis to come open unless you fly up there yourself and remove the little clip. The servo we're looking at now controls steering. One end of it goes to the tail of the plane and controls your rudder, and the other end, as you can see it moving back and forth, goes over here to your nose wheel and moves the nose wheel back and forth slightly. You're going to find it requires very little motion of the nose wheel to make your plane steer, and that's why it moves so very little.
Let's take a look at the transmitter. This movement is going to cause the plane to turn left or right, and this movement will force the plane up or down. Let's take a look at the plane itself. Moving the stick to the right is going to move the rudder, which will turn it, and to the left, turning left. The trim controls will allow you that fine tuning so that your plane can be made to fly straight and level, hands off. Elevator controls, again similar to the rudder, up and down, and of course a trim control for fine tune. Let's just take a look at the plane itself. A right turn, and left turn, down elevator, and then up elevator, which will take your plane up. During our first flight, we've used the trim levers on our transmitter, and we've got them on right now. You can see us moving the elevator slightly to get our plane to fly straight and level. After the first flight, we're going to use our clevises, which are adjustable here on the tail of the airplane, and by moving them in or out, we'd like to get our trim controls centered. So we'll try to maintain the position of the elevator and rudder, center the trim lever, and that again is done by moving our clevis.
We've come a long way from the days of tissue paper and dope paint. The modern coverings are a miracle, enabling almost anyone to do a beautiful job. One of my personal favorites is Black Baron covering from Coverite. It has an amazing ability to stretch around corners and curves and then shrink all the wrinkles right out. Now we're going to get you out on the field in a minimum of time with a plane you can be proud of. There are a few items you'll need in order to cover your plane. We've got a Hobbyco heat iron right here, and in order to read the temperature, a little thermometer, which you sit upon it, you wait a minute or so, and you'll have the actual temperature that your iron is at. Here's what it looks like. In addition, you'll require a nice sharp hobby knife. Some fresh blades would definitely be worth having. The more often you change the blade, the sharper your cuts will be. And finally, we've got a heat gun, which is not absolutely necessary to build your model, but for the larger areas like your wing, comes in very, very handy. Before you start covering, be sure you take some time to round all your edges, which we've done along here. And we've also filled in a few little nicks and dings. I think they'll show up on the side of the fuselage. And to do that, we've used a vinyl filler just like this. Let's put this aside, and we're going to start by covering the rudder. We've cut a section of covering material just a little bigger than the surface we're covering. We're going to get it in place, And our covering procedure is going to be to tack down the corners of it rather than the entire piece. When we're working on solid material, we're going to lower the temperature of the iron slightly so we don't shrink the material too much. We'll get a few more tacks into it. You can see the material start to pucker as it shrinks a little bit. And now we can iron down the bulk of it. You'd like to work on solid surfaces from the center outward so that you force any air that's trapped underneath out and underneath from the covering material. I think we can catch the fact that we're now closing up the front edge. We'd like to overlap with the first side a little bit around the front, and then we'll lap the other side back on top of it to close it up and make it fuel proof. When we do a corner, and an assistant is nice to have here, but we'll get a little tension on it, you can start by pulling the material around the corner slightly. There's a lot of stretch and give to this material, so you'll find it's quite easy to stretch it around the side and get a nice wrinkle-free covering.
That's one of the beauties of Black Baron covering film, its ability to work around tight curves and edges.
Curves for most people are one of the most challenging parts, and it's quite easy here to get just about all the wrinkles out. We've got our piece just about covered on one side now. I'm going to set my iron aside, and with my sharp hobby knife, cut off the excess. Again, we're leaving enough overlap that it'll run around onto the other side a little bit and allow us to cover it back in. And cut a little more off down here on the bottom. Now we'll tack the rest of it down all the way around those edges. Now we'd like the material to shrink a little more. In fact, we're going to raise the temperature a little bit just to get all those little pucker marks to go away. As you can see, that's a far cry from 3 coats of dope and tissue and silk. In fact, we've even got enough play in this material to force it into this pretty large inside gap and up and around. And I hope you can see what we've got at this point. One side covered. We brought the material around the front edge and down into the gap here for the elevator. And we've overlapped the rear edge by a little bit, and again we're going to carry the covering from the other side, the bare side, over onto this to form a fuel-proof coating. I really like this translucent backing material on the covering we're using. It's a lot easier to see as you remove it, and you know you've found it and gotten it off. On the other hand, it does stick to the modeler a little bit. Let's place our covering material right down on top of the framework. We've cut a piece big enough to overlap by about, half an inch or an inch all the way around. We're covering the center section and we're going to tack it down at the corners to get it in place. At this moment, we're not trying to get the entire piece glued down, but more get it placed and held in the right spot. Now we'll begin by getting the front attached a little more firmly. Again, since we're working on solid wood, there's no need to go with a real high temperature iron because you do not really want to shrink the material all too much. This is where your good sanding job really pays off because your covering material will reveal every little bump and nick in there So those few minutes you spent sanding are well worth the time. Now let's put a little tension at the back edge and get that down in a few places. And right now we'll get the center section down. Now we're going to get the rest of the trailing edge completely down. And you can probably see it's going down very easily. Just working the wrinkles out. We've started working away from the center. Again, we'd like to push any air that's going to get trapped out from under the covering material. You can probably see we've put a little tension into here just in getting the material onto the wing. We'd like to avoid having to shrink it any more than necessary. So there are very, very few wrinkles right now, and a little bit of shrinking, and we'll have it completely down. Let's just tip the wing up, and working from the center, we're going to pull it around the trailing edge and get it completely sealed down. We will be able to go back on the other side. In fact, let's turn this around so that the camera can show you what we're pulling out. And you'll see a few little wrinkles come out as we put a little tension on it. We're going to stretch it around the tip a little bit. Again, that extra stretch helps a lot here. Let's lay it down and see where we stand. A little more work on the leading edge. You know, we've chosen white, but as you can see on our work table, there are an awful lot of colors that you can use to decorate your plane. And given the speed that this stuff goes on with, there's no excuse for not coming up with something nice looking. Well, I think you see we've got it fully ironed down around the sides. Again, time for the hobby knife to trim away some of the excess. A sharp knife is a definite attribute here. As you can see, you can cut right through it in one continuous sweep. Let's take a look at the wingtip now. In fact, I've done a nice enough job covering the bottom that I'm just going to carry this flap right up and get the wingtip covered. Save myself one piece of material to be applied. And a little bit of stretch to bring it around. You see there are very, very few wrinkles forming in here. And a little pull. In fact, maybe we can see this pucker. Let's see if we can pull that out now with a little bit of tension and a little bit of heat. There it's going. And I don't know if we can catch that, but it's all gone. So let's get the knife. Another little bit of trimming. We've actually managed now to cover both the bottom and the wingtip with one piece of material. Now's the time to show you one of the fun parts of covering your airplane, and that's finally shrinking your material drum tight. We're using the heat gun here because the large area can be done very quickly. Got to be a little careful not to melt the material, but as you can see, the wrinkles and puckers practically vanish. And we've got about a third of this panel done right now, and in about another half a minute we'll have this panel all set. Here's our completed wing. Now finish your fuselage as well, of course. We've done some trim work on here. Let's take a look at some trim sheets. The beauty of these is that they're self-adhesive. You don't get any bubbles. And they come in a variety of colors and patterns. We've used a solid one to make this wing mark and a little bit of trim tape to outline it.
Let's take a look at one of the first maneuvers you'll have to perform as you learn to fly your airplane, and that's a simple turn. We'll fly down the length of the runway here, get that plane under control, and we'll ease in just a little bit of right rudder, a little bit of up elevator to keep the nose up, and around we go. Always keep your eye on that plane. You don't want to lose track of it. We're going to confine ourselves to rather shallow turns in the first few flights to get the feel of the airplane. And we'll sneak in a little loop here. Takes a little time to take our mind off some of the other aspects of flying. We're doing an awful lot of our flying down near the ground, and that's primarily for the camera. Definitely not what you'd do as a beginner. Bear in mind that a model airplane is definitely not a toy, and you've got to be careful with what you do. In fact, if you're a beginner, we strongly recommend that you get the help of an experienced instructor before you go out and try to learn to fly.
Well, now that you've covered your model, you're going to have to do one of the parts which a lot of modelers dread. That's hinging. Installing the hinges can either be trouble or a pleasure. I found a little secret in the Great Plains PT-40 book, which frankly I'd never seen before, and it works awfully well. We've taken a flattened out soda straw, which as you can see can fit inside the hinge slot which was cut before. What we're going to do is get a little bit of slow set epoxy into the soda straw. We're going to insert the soda straw into the hinge slot. Blow to force the epoxy into the slot. And we'll get a little more in there. I've tried many different ways to get the epoxy in, and this one seems to work real well. I'm going to take my paper towel and wipe away the excess. What we're trying to do is avoid getting any glue into the pivot of the hinge. If we do, we'll have a hinge that doesn't work smoothly. And then we can just work the hinge down into the slot. We've got it completely flush with the trailing edge. I think we can see that on camera. And no glue whatsoever in it. A nice, smooth, easy working hinge. Work your way through the rest of them. Keep in mind, when you hinge this surface to the fuselage, you've got to be careful because you will have 3 or 4 hinges at the same time. Be sure you've got a good fit dry before you try and assemble with glue. And then put it together and keep it nice and free, just as we have here. The plane is awful stable near the ground, so we'll just fly parallel to the runway, swing a little bit to the left here. We'll swing a nice gentle right turn, a little wind coming up. And here we come on final approach. Chop that throttle way back, get our wings level. We're reducing throttle gradually, and hold the nose up slightly, and we're about ready to land. And down we are.
Hi, I'm Victor Milt, publisher of the Milt Video Libraries, and a fellow hobbyist like yourself. I just want to let you know we have a lot more films in pre-production or on the drawing boards. Films on covering techniques, construction techniques, large scale, half-A, pylon, and control line racers. In order to keep the library alive and growing, we're going to need your help. Meanwhile, keep building and keep flying. At this point, I'd like to thank the manufacturers whose products we used in the construction of this plane.
The following products were made by Hobbyco. The Deluxe 12-volt electric starter. The Digital Mini-Tac. the electric fuel pump, an expanded scale voltmeter,